Glad you called.
I mean, I'm glad I'm sitting here waiting, and I'm glad you called because better not be wearing like camera shorts and
I don't even want
Vladimir
to
Zelensky
guess.
T-shirt.
I'm not going to guess.
All right, we are on.
Okay. All right, I'll call this meeting to order. Ms. Crawford, you call roll, please.
Sure. Mr. Grumbles. I understand he'll be about 5 minutes late. Ms. Knapp.
Here.
Mrs. Faust.
Here. And we'll do Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As Ms. Kraft said, Mr. Grumbles is running a couple minutes late, so he told us to go ahead and get started. First, today we are here to discuss the brand new Parks Master Plan, and it's my understanding we have a consultant here to present to us. Would you like to go ahead?
Thank you. I'm Keith Romanhauser with Francis Rivera with the consultant. Start by saying you have a great park system. Thank you. It's great to work here. Hoping that this plan will help you meet the system you have. Let's say that staff overall was great to work with, especially in size. Started, they jumped right in and they noticed the flow be very well, and the time would be. So why does this plan matter? For a lot of reasons. First of all, it ensures that the department is in line with the needs. Also, let you know what needs to be upgraded or should be upgraded, and to help you strengthen your fiscal responsibility and sustainability. You have to know what needs to be done to prioritize things, prepare for future development, and respond to change. Community been growing fairly rapidly for a long time. Expect to continue to grow. For your internal operations, so direct the department and make sure things are. And make sure that what you offer isn't already offered by someone. There's a lot of other agencies offering services. We got 3 other park systems inside the township, as well as many private. Finally, to address the connectivity needs. There's a lot of demand for trails, and you've got a great start trail system here. So our process was a 4-step process. The first step was the evaluate phase, where we went and looked at all of the parks, benchmarking against the communities, mapping, service area mapping to see where the parks and facilities. On to the engagement. Had the ballot survey was sent by me. Online survey as well. And open house on this right here. We had a series of stakeholders. We take all that information and we interact with our steering committee. We had 5 meetings, also here. And then once we presented all of our findings, we let them transition. That we take all that and help them myself. But what did the data tell us? Based on the mapping that I told you about, overall showed that the largest percentage were in the median category, but it's pretty fairly even. Overall, just over a third, or 37%, walking distance to a park. But almost everybody walked to or drive to within 5 minutes of larger parks, or the larger parks.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The site assessment we found that we some needs for some more wayfinding, some minor aid deficiencies. The overall did a great job, especially accessibility. There are a few places where maybe a trail walkway here. The older facilities are a little older, need replacing. And, but there are opportunities to address a lot of these needs, especially at the North Road facility and even some space in North Road. Community, according to our statistics survey, most of the community actually use parks. 86% of households reported that they visit them. As I mentioned earlier, population has grown rapidly. In fact, they continue to grow faster than most communities. Diversity of the population growth. Potentially, 70% of the population growth was from minority groups. Population is getting older. While you do have a younger population than some of the states, your older population is still growing. Looking at some of the benchmarking, we compared the community to 32 other agencies within the nearby states, similar sizes. It showed that overall, if you look at the figure, you have fewer playgrounds, you don't have any tennis courts above. We didn't find a lot of demand. Basketball courts are fairly close. Diamond fields are much lower, but again, golf fields, adult softball is but finally, those rectangular fields, you are way ahead of everybody. A lot of those fields of soccer, and especially compared to where you're at and everything else. Now, your staff, compared to others, you don't have quite as many staff to help maintain some of these facilities, and especially for this area. More things that we maintain. Operations are a little lower, operating budget. Acreage per population is also lower. Now, it looks like it's a third, but really, when you think about state park and Powell County parks, overall, it's the same. More access. In trails, you have more trails. This is a map that shows that 10-minute walk time to parks in the area. And while it's much less than a third of the community is covered, parks are more centralized than where people live. About 37% of any of the parks, not just groups. Also, here, this map shows how pretty much everybody in the whole township does live within a larger park. This figure here is one that I talked about overall level of services. Combination of 5 different areas. So 3 different park categories as well as 13 different park. Overall, I think you can see that for the center of the township has the highest level. The areas with the lowest level of service. As I mentioned before, we had a lot of community engagement. First, we had the ballot survey that was sent out to them. The goal was 300 return to go for our. We actually did it before the 25%, 400 on, which is our online survey had over 1,200 people did that survey. Most of them lived in the community. But the thing with the online survey is that not statistically valid. So certain groups can go in there and all of their members to fill it out. Overall, it wasn't pretty consistent. We had a series of stakeholder groups, different groups, race interests. Better party. Some of your neighbors. I only had an open house in this room where we didn't have quite as many people, but we did get really good feedback. Just a quick summary of what we heard as far as programs people get the concept. For performances, they kind of departments, of course, we don't have a program. But with the staff at hired, they need costs. And they collect fees. Second was fitness and wellness programs. We want teacher programs. We really high on the list, and this is one of them. I would recommend that you a better fit for reservation parks or metro parks or even state parks, but you can partner with them to help promote and are aware of need. Then active adult programs. As I mentioned, you have an aging population. Those older people today are a lot more active. They don't like to be called seniors, so 50 plus programs. They're active programs, not. Facilities. Everybody wants more trails. That's here. That's everywhere we go. It doesn't matter how many trails we have. Bike trails are also very, very common. People want to be able to get to your parks. They want to be able to get to places in town without having to. Aquatics, splash pads, for example. Sometimes people don't want to spend all day at the pool. Maybe they just go and cool off for a minute and it's okay. But something like that would be preferably located somewhere away from where you're currently. The amphitheater, you need that in order to host many of the activities. Finally, a dog park. There is a dog park in the state park, but it's kind of far away. And everywhere we go, people want it. It's not just for dogs. It's actually probably more for the people who are bringing it. System-wide connectivity, accessibility, restrooms. That's number one thing that people and people don't want porta potties. People want nice, clean restrooms, and they don't leave their parks. So the fact that they want a restroom means they want bad things. Upgrades to some of your existing parks, as I mentioned, there were some things that needed to be replaced. I was talking about new features at some of your parks. And then the last thing was shade. That's shade at playground and shade CD. Strategic plan. This is a result of us working with the steering committee to sort of digest everything we heard from the public, come up with a mission, which is enrich life, parks, so people, parks, and experiences. Vision, which is deliver dynamic experiences that serve our diverse population. And 5 values. How you direct how you operate. Community, quality, connectivity, accessibility. Pretty much sums up the first. Then we have 4 goals. Quality parks and facilities, continuous engagement, community connections, and responsible operations. Each of these goals has 3 objectives, and each of those objectives has a series of actions in order to accomplish that objective. So the broad recommendations overall, add and expand the support features. Those are the features that people don't necessarily go for these features, but they make the experience. Restrooms, shade, seating, street landscape. It just makes their experience better all the time. Continue to ensure ADA accessibility, both with what we've already got and future things, so everybody can use them. Add and connect trails. Throughout the township, this map here is the latest update for your township trail plan. And talk to Title Sawyer, it won't be long before this already needs to be updated. I know I remember hearing some the trails don't connect, but that's finally starting to happen over the next 10 years or so. Trails on the road. As I mentioned, utilize the newly hired staff member to start some of this new equipment. Institute a easy to understand cost recovery pricing. You need this so you know how much to charge for those users. And so I started doing this already, updated the fees for field roads. And now for any kind of program you offer, so next is to seek opportunities to remove parks in underserved areas. As I noted earlier, you don't have as much land as some of the other agencies. And while the county and the state parks make up for the overall amount of land, they don't really offer neighborhood things. So that's probably where you need to focus on. This map here shows some locations that you could look to develop some neighborhood parks, all of which are land that is already there. Many of these, the ones called ones are corner association land that's just sitting there. The ones that are owned. That last one is the county park that they're currently working on a plan. They address many of other things. Another thing is to coordinate the cross-promote effect. Make sure people are aware. A lot of what we heard are facilities and programs that are available. Even inside the township, people just don't. So it's important to work with those three agencies, the private agencies, to make sure the public is aware of what everybody is. Look at some alternative funding methods. The Parks Foundation can raise funds. Promote parks. Then some new features that you don't currently have in your system. Pickleball. Probably heard about pickleball, the fastest growing sport in America. Outdoor fitness equipment. You've seen that. It's the equipment they have today. Basically, like what you see in a gym, it's just that. That's put in. It's really heavily used, and that also helps with this. And there's amphitheaters like that. And disc golf. There's definitely some demand for disc golf in the area. They actually have a that showed that there is a demand for disc golf. It can work, but it also kind of showed that maybe this isn't the best work, especially after we look into the other. Certainly, it would be a great thing to have somewhere. And my personal opinion would be that that's the best. Reservation park, state parks. Just because they have the land, they have the space. It's easy to integrate and blend it, maybe. And then expand the capacity play fields. As I mentioned, you have a fair amount of field. You don't really have space. Best way to address that need would be maybe, or first you can get more use out of what you already. That would be best on most of the purpose. This is the action plan I mentioned earlier. It is a list of all of the specific actions within the plan. There are 95 of those actions. They're organized under the goals and under the objectives. And on the right side of the panel, there's the time frame, and then the category, whether it's capital operations. And who's going to do it? It's not always you or sites, sometimes partners. And then finally, funding support for this operations category. This is actually the beginning of this phase of the project, the implementation, where we turn it over to you while we're always happy to.
With the, I guess the only question I would have is with respect to the surveys that were done. And I know you've done quite a few of these when I looked at rating your company and saw all the different communities you participated in. Obviously, folks that have an interest and can kind of rally the base for that interest. How did you, when you may have already answered this, and I apologize for being late. How do you account for that? So you get a disproportionate amount of folks. You take that into account with your statistical.
Yeah, yes, of course. We look at all the different methods. House survey, definitely. The same, but it's also important to look at that. Both the open house meeting and the online survey that anybody can fill out does tell you what the most interesting.
Mode.
Yes,
Right.
motivating. Those people use your parks the most. So we don't just do whatever they want. We want to serve everybody. We have to look at all of that. So if all the people come out and say more fields, probably not going to be.
Yes, I know that there was a lot of discussion about, well, obviously, these folks have, for example, the club soccer. It serves a large quantity of families, not just in the township, but I would expect that they would have had a really high volume quantity of surveys or participation. Pickleball, we know there's increased demand, that kind of thing, but at the same time, it's a function of how well we reached each base with the request for a survey. So, cricket is something that, from a demographic standpoint, fastest growing in the county from Asia. And so, cricket's a pastime there like baseball here. And so, we see a demand for there where they may not have receive notification or be signed up on a listserv or something. And I know we exhausted ourselves to try and get the word out. But at the same time, the timing of demand or uptick, it's just, I didn't see, for example, cricket when I walked in anyway. But I know there's an increased demand for that. And we've got some partnerships in place that might help facilitate additional field space there. We have shared use now. And as
You have one field.
Right. And I know with the upgrades and changes coming to North Road, it will change the dynamic there quite a bit with the existing structure. And we have a potential option coming in the pipeline now through another agency that we're partnering, looking at how we can partner with it on a secondary field, a more permanent, dedicated structure. But that takes quite a bit of footprint. And because of the nature of the sport, what we're finding out too is, we're learning all the time. With the speed and the ball itself is a little harder, and it's not like baseball where you have a set angle and everyone knows you've got to put fencing up, and you've got adults and they're hitting the ball quite hard, and it can go forward, backward, sideways. So it's not as easy to integrate that with other activities in a smaller footprint. So that was the basis for my question.
So a couple things. You mentioned that
Okay.
Nobody from outside.
Oh, okay. Good.
And the other thing is, while the web survey does show higher levels of interest, those same families still use trails.
Exactly.
So that's another reason it just doesn't.
Yeah.
With regard to we're about that ourselves, even we're in Roswell, Georgia, and airplane at home. They've got a little setup and know how to do it.
Yep. That's what we're doing. We're seeing a lot of that here too, where they're renting entire baseball for tournament play and things like that. And but it's a quite a large draw. I've been to a few of the tournaments and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. So it's interesting to see, as we evolve as a culture, I would say, and a community. As folks bring things from home and first generation, Americans, and they're bringing new pastimes. Rugby's another one that's growing rapidly. We're seeing demand for rugby. I played rugby, so I have to can't participate in voting, right, because of my bias. But jokes aside, it's good. It's good to see such diversity in this community. It really is.
Throwing sports, you have health.
And then you get the complaints because lacrosse and rugby tear the field up.
Well, you get that in whoever else is still getting it.
It's pretty rough. So
And he did mention earlier that, like, as far as rectangular fields, we have a ton of rectangular fields here. That's the one area that we excel
doing
in.
pretty good.
Yeah, so yeah, it's pretty big.
Is it, I think what fields so that you make sure for residents, all you say, and then
That's also been a challenge. We've tried to address, and Mr. Bowers did a great job with our new field use agreement, where we started to look at the proportion of participants that are actually township residents. How well are we serving our township, because that's who's funding all of this. And finding that balance so that we want utility, but at the same time we want to outsource all these assets that have been taxpayer funded to the point where the very taxpayers that funded those don't have access or utilization of them. So how do we strike that balance? And it's also been a challenge.
and that's important. Not you do want to serve, but if you bring some residents.
It's just a balance. So we're learning we're learning how to strike our best balance still, and commend again Mr. Bowers for working hard towards that as a request from the board. So did a good job with that.
So when I originally moved into the township in 1998, we had no parks at all, like not a single park. And I was around and working for the board, the original Parks Board, and it was really exciting to see when they were so dynamic, and they got our pool going and the different parks, and so it was so exciting during that time to see that kind of momentum. Is at one point we had discussed having parks in neighborhoods, because it does seem like that's some of the remaining acreage, but there was the former trustees years ago didn't want to do that for some reason. But is that a thing that you see in a lot of communities, taking advantage of larger spaces that are owned maybe by homeowners associations or things like that, and in areas like ours where we don't really have a lot of property left?
Right, well, especially in lease or purchase or something, so they can help that and meet the needs of those residents who.
Yeah, because they're required to have 20% open space, and a lot of times it just doesn't even get used at all. And sometimes they don't necessarily want something on it; it just looks nice, but it's really hard to find any wide open spaces around here that haven't already been developed or are so valuable because they're commercial property or something. It's a struggle.
Yes, and there's usually a reason. There's a good amount.
One of the things too that I know we've talked about briefly, but to really consider as well, if you look at like Glen Oak and some of the other HOA properties or neighborhoods, there's quite a bit of utility easements and things like that in place. And so I know with community gardening, for example, that land is not utilized ever. And so I think for the next phase, as we settle in with some of the work, and probably we've got a ton of work on the agenda for the Parks Department. They've got quite a bit of that they're working through now. But how do we partner with? I heard you talk about collaborating with other agencies, and I think looking at utilities is another critical partner for the group here to talk with, because that land and that upkeep, that's a burden on them too, to go in and mow that continuously. So there's at least 100 acres. It's got to be close to that at Glen Oak, of just different areas. Some of it swampy and marshy and such, but there's several good tracks. And I know, for example, in Glen Oak Park, the same power line structure we've utilized, in proximity to come up with playing fields. Right across the street, similar footprint and linear footprint. So I think that'll be in the pipeline for us to consider too.
Like owned by the homeowners association?
It's either I believe it is the HOA, but the challenge has always been the accessibility by the utilities. If we put structure and they can't get to the lines, they can't get to the poles and the towers, then yeah, I mean, at Glen Oak Park, we have fields and we have some smaller structures and pavilions that one of them is really close to one of the main, what are those called? The big towers. Yeah. So, so we pulled it off there. So then it brings to question, is it, if it worked here, can it work there? And how do we negotiate with the HOA, to your point, in order to make that a reality? Strategy 115, where we look at neighborhood specific features. So.
Yeah, because back in the day, there were so many wide open spaces that were available for donation or purchase, and those are just pretty much gone now. Yeah, it's kind of sad. Let's see. I think I do see that this survey says that we're vastly underutilized in many areas, that we don't have enough facilities. I do think that our parks funds, Ms. Kraft,
Yes.
we're kind of running out of money. Is that true in the parks fund?
Parks,
Yeah, or do we have excess in that?
We're doing okay right now. At the last, Monday's meeting, we all decided to encumber 1.2 million for North Road Park, if I have that correctly.
Yes.
And be like 2 minutes and I'll come back to it.
Okay, yeah, because I know that I think we weren't quite as dire a situation, but
No,
these
it's
parks are
roads that,
expensive. Yeah, roads are bad.
It's tough right now.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Parks collects at a higher levy rate than roads too. Parks
Because of
collects
that
at 1
rollback,
mils
yeah.
and roads collects at a half mils. I think our balance is about 5.2 million in parks, and going through my head. Yeah. But I think we're about 5.2 million right now in parks. But
Yeah. And having these different parks facilities always adds value to our properties. I think at some point I'd like to see maybe a dedicated parks manager hired at some point. 'Cause this is huge. I think it's very difficult to manage a department with roads and parks. I think it gets I think it's to be a lot of work, or maybe a separate manager. Some places have separate parks managers.
Mike Kelly, right?
Yeah, but like an independent, like separate department head that answers to the trustees.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So split it off.
Yeah,
As
so
its own
that's
entity.
a lot of work
Yeah.
for Silas, I know. And it's kind of they can be collaborative, but the parks mindset versus the roads and construction mindset, it's a whole different ballgame. We used to years ago had our original parks manager, Barb Barbowski, that kind of started everything. But yeah, I think it would be great to get a dog park and more pickleball. Get the trails finished. There's a lot of different things here that are really very exciting.
I know too with the
programming.
tennis, I've seen where that is. I mean, with the new facility approved, even though it's private, they did commit to having public access to that facility. And then with the schools, with being able to utilize those when the schools aren't in play, still a shortage.
What about pickleball? Like, is there? I know I've had some comments. They don't just want it to be at North Road Park. They want it to be in other places.
Everywhere. It's like
Everywhere.
Every sport.
Is there a way to have pickleball? Can it be used for? Are there other things the courts can be used for, or is it pretty much just has to be dedicated space?
Dedicated. I would
Yeah,
prefer
yeah.
dedicated too. And the reason is, I played tennis for a while, and I can imagine if you've got the way the tennis courts and facilities are structured, so you have mixed use at the same time, it could get a little crazy. But
Yeah.
I could envision a facility that had a section dedicated for tennis and then a section dedicated for pickleball. So they're in proximity, but there's not such a busy quantity of lines, and layouts and such. Yeah, I would agree.
But and then
You can ask the pickleball people.
well, and then
I'll tell you.
but then I hopefully it'll be a trend that lasts for a while because that's the worst when you build something and then it kind of goes out of style.
So, pickleball, the growth.
Yeah, and it's fun to watch too. It's actually fun to watch. Watched a few tournaments on TV.
You might want to watch out as a little bit.
Yeah, probably just keep it small for recreational use. Yeah, we don't have a lot of room. Isn't it like $500,000? Isn't that the one? Didn't we hold off on Road Park or North Road Park because is it $500,000 for the court? Michelle, what was that?
Yeah, we haven't. We're still negotiating the
But
final
it's
cost.
it's
of
pretty
that. It's
expensive
significant.
though, right? Like $500,000 for
It was $500,000, I think, originally, but then a change order proposal came in, and that's what we're negotiating now.
how many courts is that?
For
Four. Okay, that's pretty expensive.
It's also including the parking lot. Yeah.
I thought it was $1 million for the parking lot and the pickleball.
Combined.
Yeah, so like maybe $500,000, or was it more for the pickleball?
Well, the initial proposal for the pickleball and the parking lot was $500,000, and then they changed order payments
together?
that mentioned together. Yes.
Okay.
hmm
I thought it was $1 million.
the change proposal that came in was more than
Better?
double that.
Okay, so
think it
that's
was-
where that came from.
1.2.
That was what, in 6
Well,
months' time?
the initial, I think it was more $750. Yeah, $750 for the two.
But what was the change order?
Just because of the supply shortage.
Okay, yeah,
of
that's why. So
industry, yeah.
so the pickleball could be $500,000 or more.
That's the thing. Also, if the pickleball, you also need parking in.
Oh yeah, it was everything. It was very pricey.
When they changed the price tag, it was a few months out that the price drastically increased.
Yeah, it was crazy.
So we're gonna.
It like doubled, didn't it double or something?
It was a pretty significant increase.
Yeah, I would like to have two sections though with pickleball. I think it's.
Yeah.
I've
We
never
talked
played
about
it, but it was
potentially
fun.
putting pickleball here at the Township Hall at one point. I know that our design engineer had put together a plan that had pickleball integrated here as well. And I believe it was below the maintenance facility. Yep. So I think finding a place for pickleball to fit was not as big of a challenge as some of the other requests because the courts aren't massive.
No, they're small, and it's good to have them for best serve them.
Just one.
For tournaments.
Tournaments and
And not just that, it's a very social.
Yeah. wine and pickles.
And we
Just a
almost-
quick response on your finance question. So it's 5.1 million is our current pool balance in that account and for parks, but understand that we have about 3.2 million of that is available to spend. The rest is already encumbered. So you've got about 2 million encumbered right now.
Okay. I mean, we might
and
have-
we spent almost 1.3 million so far year to date.
And when we started this out years ago, we had a dedicated parks board. We might have to bring something like that back. I mean, I know OTAC is doing it. But
Yeah, OTAC is, exactly.
it is, but maybe have them branch out and make a separate. We had a separate parks board that didn't. It kind of devolved into something at some point, but maybe we don't
Yeah,
think about
so
reenacting that.
The way the organizational chart works for OTAC, it does have an option for a parks subcommittee, so we can
That'd be a good
revisit
idea
that.
to
Yeah.
pick that up. Because OTAC, the structure of OTAC's been working quite well.
Is it?
And yeah, in my opinion, I just one person, but I've been to a couple of meetings and I thought they were.
Yeah, oh
Pretty
yeah,
effective.
but I find that the Parks Board, at least for the first 10 years, was very effective because it was a separate group. It did its own thing. It didn't have to answer anyone except for the trustees. They were usually very motivated, excited people who came in and had all these proposals. And they did a lot of the late work, and because they were so passionate that they just took it
OTAC
and
would be
went.
perfect for
Yeah.
that. So we may want to add that to a future meeting agenda.
Give me extra.
Yeah, I think we should.
And I mean, that's so.
Yeah,
would
probably,
suffice.
but a lot of these places have independent, they're separate, and you can even have one that's actually kind of independent from
It
the
would
trustees,
be-
but.
It would be independent in that sense. It's like,
Why does it have to be under the OTOC though? Like, why can't it be by itself?
just that's the structure that we agreed to. We could
We
change.
could change it though.
Yeah,
It just
I
was
mean-
so, I found it was so dynamic, and then when people think they're part of a group of like, it was 5 people, I think, maybe 7.
That's just like OTOC.
Yeah, but they were very, and they had that, like, we enabled them and empowered them to come, to go out and do things, and it was, a lot of places have it separate rather than one big mass.
Do we hear from the residents if they have feedback?
No.
Public comment?
You would just come, would you mind coming up?
When you come up, if you could just share your name and address, and then keep your comments around 3 minutes, please, just so that we can get through all the different positions.
Ray Bohack, 3258 Select Drive. I'm just curious, is this a plan? Is this a plan, or how does this become a plan where there's a projection, a pathway that residents?
So what we'll decide tonight is we'll say, yes, this is the plan, and this will be our guide as we make decisions over the next decade. So we'll decide
But
tonight.
it's more a recommendation,
Yeah.
so that was my concerns, what are the next steps? I mean, anyone can put together recommendations, and then nothing ever gets followed through, which is why I would like to possibly think about getting a
Yeah.
parks board together, and maybe getting eventually a separate parks department, parks manager, because I think this, trying to create a plan and implement it would be a lot of work, quite a bit of work.
We have the action plan that was shared as far as proposal with goals and objectives, and I think that's a great baseline to start with. But to Trustee Faust, spot on. This is a recommendation, and we'll take the recommendation and go from there. So I think this is step one, right? So this is a guide. This is a guide, and then I think as we finalize where we take our rifle shots, if you will, we'll be, communicating with the public and working through that. But we have for example, if you can't tell from an alignment standpoint, we have work to do as a board, right? Because OTOC was new a couple years ago. Some subcommittees have done things differently than others, and so we just need to align as a board and structure how, expectations, and make sure we're clear on that. What do we want OTOC to do? Do we need a second board? How do we approach that? Obviously calls out staffing concerns with the amount that we do have in place. So we have a lot to configure on a budget, of course. But I think this is a good starting point. And then as we align on that, communicate with the public, activate either a board or OTOC on the park specifically, and start the outreach process. Hey, we have a grant for, and that's another thing, right? Funding. So if we find funding for the bridge that everyone calls the bridge to nowhere, a lot of that was based on a grant. It was a use or lose grant. So you can put a big bridge up or lose $800,000, So if we come across a grant for trails, which we do quite frequently, we'll probably build more trails faster than other things. If we get a grant from a pickleball association or disc golf, sometimes these are earmarked grants specific for things. Then obviously that's going to push them up in the pipeline because they're time sensitive, right?
And the OTOC, if you're not familiar with it, it's the Orange Township, it's the
Outreach and Communications Committee.
And it started out years ago as being like this economic thing, and then it morphed into something else. And it's kind of
We redid the whole thing
yeah.
last, I think.
Yeah, it's
like a year
totally
or two
different
ago.
now, but
We've got
I
a
just-
little more structure, but
a lot of times you
clearly
get
we
a
got
group,
outlined.
yeah, but you get a group of residents together and they get really passionate and they take off and they do a lot of the work that maybe staff or even trustees
Yeah.
can't do. I never saw so much dedication that first
We
decade.
we
They
saw
got
that
stuff
with the
done.
Veterans
Holiday.
Memorial for sure. And also the holiday party.
Event last year.
The holiday party last year was very successful because of resident
Yeah, that's the
contribution.
same kind of thing.
Also positive feedback. I've lived here since 70. I remember 08, 09 or something. There were plans. And so great work on that. All along. And obviously funding doesn't always align with And that's probably part of the plan.
Yep.
This
We-
case law, that was really nice.
We actually just were awarded part of it. It's an active transportation plan. So we're going to be working with an organization that's going to help guide us to tell us where our deficiencies are currently in that and where the needs are. And what we just learned here today was that when we have that active transportation plan and we submit for grants and we can submit that plan with it, it kind of gives us like a bump up, and people are like, oh, they've invested the time and they really know where they need those trails, and so there's a greater likelihood of us getting grants.
Yeah,
And
there's a lot going on with that Bell Canyon,
Right.
Powell Road.
Powell Road, we just got some money that we're going to be, allocating towards the trail that we intended to do when the road was resurfaced and widened and that kind of thing, and just didn't get to scale that opportunity. So we met with I go up to the county engineer's office a couple times a year at least, and we sit down and talk. And those kind of collaborative relationships are very fruitful because they have tentacles and outreach in areas that we don't. So they're consistently sending us notes. There's money here, there's money there. We came across a grant. It'd be great for you guys, and we can help you and help make sure that you get, consideration for this. And here's what you need to do to get consideration. So we're actively working on that, working well. I think from a board and a team standpoint, the township and what I hope residents see and can feel is that we're firing away pretty quick here, and we're moving at a pace that I haven't seen in the township since I've lived here. And so when we see these trails continue to get connected, the responsiveness to residents when they have inquiries to board members or staff, the response times are extremely fast and engagement's high. So we're paying attention, and we're going to keep doing that and working to get the trails connected and things like that. So
It's exciting to see the progress.
Do we
Yeah.
need more members for the OTAC subcommittee?
what we would do in the past is we would put out a request for folks
Send the
at
resumes,
resumes, similar to the
But
Parks
do we
Board.
have openings? Like how many people are on that?
OTAC is 5.
On the park subcommittee?
We have not developed publicized that we're having that yet, so that would probably be our next
So
step.
if we put that
Okay,
out,
that's
then we'll
what-
get
We're currently publicized for our events subcommittee.
events, and then we did the Veterans Memorial, we did
Zoning.
Yeah, so that should,
zoning.
you need to bring Chrissy and the rest of the core OTOC team into that discussion.
Yeah, so we might have a need, if you sound very interested, we might have a need to, actually maybe give Michelle your information. If you're taking any names for things, maybe if you're interested, or we'll put it out.
We can reach out or I'll keep an eye out.
You can email us too, if you email Michelle, myself, any of the board members and say, hey, I have an interest. If you stand up a committee, we'll put that in the file.
Because
And
that's how it all started back in the day when we had a bunch of old, 80-year-old trustees, and that was 3 of them, and they didn't have any interest in parks. This is back in the day. And then the dynamic people got together, people maybe like you or other people here, and really made things happen. And it was super exciting. So I think we can bring that back.
helps us stay engaged in what folks are really interested in. There's 30,000 plus people out here. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you for your
Thank you
time.
for coming.
If I could add, it would be good to maybe invite, if you're going to set up a committee like that, invite some of the members of our steering committee.
How
They've
many
been involved
members?
the whole time, and they know a lot about the plan already.
How many members were on that steering committee?
I have a list here.
10 or 11.
And how were those members selected?
Political relationships.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. It
Whoa.
So-
They knew people?
Did that predate you?
was a process. It was,
Some of it predated me, some of it was, once I started, there were, some reached out to us, we were just following our, just asking for volunteers, some of them were, known, throughout the township, I guess, for as most who would probably be interested in active in it, so it's just kind of a combination.
And if I remember correctly, the consultant actually said, you need this type of member, we need a member with this skill set, a member from this type of, stakeholder group, and that I thought they kind of
yeah,
steered
there was
that
an effort
direction
to balance
also.
interests.
We do provide guidelines for who you should invite to be involved.
Right.
And really, that 9 to 12 range is about as much as you want in any group like that.
I don't know if we have any members of the steering committee in the audience, but we really thank you for your service. And I think there were 17 meetings that you guys had. Is that what I saw on the
That was the stakeholder groups. We had, I think it was 5.
5 meetings? Well, that's a lot of time. So
A lot of
we appreciate
meetings.
you.
Thank you.
Overall, though. A lot of participation.
Oh, yeah. Did we have any other resident comments?
I'm Brandon Worth, I live at 72. I just wanted to mention, we talked about pickleball, but I wanted to mention kids. We have a lot of soccer kids, soccer programs, and baseball, programs. A lot of those things are run by adults. Kids that play those things have parents that are signing them up for and taking them. We also have a large population of two working parents who might not be going. But I do appreciate talking about the balance of spending out the field, so a lot of times fields aren't just.
Right.
The other thing I wanted to mention is disc golf, and while pickleball is fast, disc golf is also fast growing. It's really growing with our. We have a field close to us, but it's at our green. It is not a beginner course. Never been on it. I have watched numerous disc water. It's a forest. I have younger kids. Mine are now older. If I had younger kids, I wouldn't let them. If we had something that was open a park like this, could have a small beginning that kids ride their bike. Kids ride their bike here. Kids ride their bike here to play basketball. So I am begging you to please keep this a very kid-friendly park. No more concrete. Love concrete games. I have played tennis, but it's really important to keep the. And if it's something we can do that maybe you have to drive to or cross 23, that's an adult more animals for play. We have a lot of kids here that aren't being driven in places and they need an opportunity to out and do things that are not just adults. That they can just do themselves. We don't have a lot of active things that our kids can do. And I'm not talking about little ones. We've got parks. Nope has a park. Elementary school has a park. All the schools have parks, right? There's a lot of playground parks. Mm-hmm. You have Glenwood Park. You got Road Park. There's two beautiful parks in that. That's not for I think really yeah, 4, 6, 7, and 8. That's the population that is left. Something like disc golf would be really. Instead of discs is cheap, not that expensive, you can get on any of the stores. Just when you're doing this process, right, when we do those surveys, they're adult surveys. We're finding out what the adults in the community want. And a lot of times we're not really adults. You might think you know what kids want, but I can guarantee you don't. So thinking about what we can do for our kids, and they should actually be our.
Well, it's also cheaper. Like you can have like we've discussed, have a temporary or a small course, and it's sure isn't going to be $500,000 or even close to it. You know, it's something where you can set it up and it's easy to use, and it doesn't necessarily disrupt the way things look, like disc golf. I know it's not like everyone's interested in that, but I think it's pretty simple.
And I want to be upfront honest. I'm at Elm Creek Elementary School. But for me, overall, my biggest passion is for those things that is not normal for kids. Robotics, things that don't necessarily fit in all of those other areas. Awesome. Just when you're doing that and thinking about it, I'm just asking, think about green space. We don't need more concrete. We really don't need more blacktop. We are suckered out of our minds. There are so many fields.
Well, and I've seen some playgrounds with like parkour kind of things where it's not a lot of concrete, but there's a huge group between like age, like you said, 4th grade and 8th grade or 9th grade that aren't served by the little kid playgrounds, and then they need more exercise. And I when I was in Florida once, I saw the nicest parkour style kind of thing, and I was so neat, but it was alongside an area where also younger kids could play, but that way you could go with the older kid and the younger, and they were getting exercise and stuff, and because there's a huge problem with kids in that age group not exercising at all, so that's more expensive, but
and I know parkour.
Yeah,
at the-
exactly.
BMX and skating is another big
Is there a
thing.
skate park?
There will be parkour in the township. I know that I went to the Preservation Parks Open House a couple weeks ago, or right, maybe even when school is still in session. And there's going up by Orange French Church on
They're putting
Orange
them
Road.
there?
They're putting parkour right there.
Good.
So it will,
Things
not
like that.
immediately, but it will be there.
And our playgrounds are even aging, you know, I mean, playgrounds are getting old, so.
But
Yeah,
I
thank
also
you.
wanted to mention, this community is amazing. Park system. It is absolutely amazing. I love it. I love seeing out in it. But like as I'm listening, as we were talking, all I kept hearing was adult.
Right.
And that starts to panic me when we talk about surveys. I think maybe as you move forward, schools are more than happy to send out. What are you interested
That's a great
in?
idea.
Mhm.
Something that, especially our middle school students. Middle school
Anything
is
off the
where they
screens.
start going down. Parents struggle, it's a really tough time for kids. If there's nothing for them to do, we'll find to do that we
Yeah.
don't want.
Yeah.
So
Very true.
my ask is just please consider that, and if there's anything that I would love to help out, so.
What's your name again? I'm sorry, Brent
Brandy Worth.
Worth? Okay.
I work in Allen Creek, but I mentioned robotics first 12th grade, so I have this stand, and I have 2 kids that are gone and out, away, so I have more time, except for robotics. But I have a different perspective that is different. Talking about middle school, I work at an elementary school, I forget about high school.
Yeah, once you've had teenagers, you
Big
know.
comments.
Yeah, I think
you.
like these kind of people, they're motivated, excited, and they want to come in and
Yeah.
they want to work and they want to get stuff done. That's the original parks people.
Easy disc golfers.
Because we can't do everything ourselves as trustees or even as staff that don't necessarily even live in the community. You know.
And your comments are spot on. And I live in Glen Oak, so when I drive through, I see the exact age group you're talking about, and they're bringing I don't know what the name of the game is, but they'll bring like this little round net and the ball that they're
Yeah, spike ball.
spike ball. So every day there's spike ball in the green space, to your point, and they are putting hammocks up and hanging out in a park, which as a parent, I'm okay with that. I like that, right? To your point, it's accessible. It gives them something to get out of the house and burn some energy. And then open,
Outside.
yeah.
Maybe we need some spike
Yeah.
ball.
Not needed by infrastructure. Only instructors are.
Yeah.
They will.
Maybe
Wasn't it-
simple games, like even that one where you have the rectangle, you know, the
Gaga ball.
Gaga
that.
ball,
We've
yeah.
got- those are kind of popping up multiple places.
Yeah.
Lots of Boy Scouts that are doing those.
So
kinds of
the
stuff.
other thing I would like to do is plant a seed based on your robotics comment. So my son is 7. He was just here a minute ago, and his big passion is building. Anything visual where he takes what he's thinking and transitions that into I've got to go after this meeting and pick up cardboard boxes from work for him to build his city. And so with your involvement in robotics and different options, that would be something where, to Trustee Knapp's point, it may not be something that the township can integrate itself, right? Where we can't fund a robotics center of excellence. But if there's robotics coursework, if there's robotics signups, if there's Lego, come out for Lego Day or something, that's where we would look for partnership and allow us to use our channels to communicate that out and grow the participation in that, look for funding and things like that, where we can really extend ourselves and grow what options we have in the township for people. And regarding disc golf, I came the day that they had the tournament here. It blew me away. First of all, I could not believe the quantity of people that came, but the age group is to your point. I saw so many middle school, early high school, and they rode their bikes, and they were warming up and playing. Even when they were done, they're just playing and practicing and challenge each other in the putting course and the warm-up course. It was a happy time. It was awesome. And so Silas can attest to the fact that I pushed and push and push on, hey, let's look at that and what can we do and take the feedback and the concerns and mitigate that. And I've talked with one of the residents here quite a bit about, hey, here's some of the concerns that exist with the township team. You know, how can we make, well, redesign the course. But I'm a big utility person. And disc golf, for me, here at Township Hall, the reason I'll support it, and I'm fine being open about that and advocate for it, is because it improves the utility here with very little change in the dynamic, right? So you've got a couple of small pads, and the challenge then is, okay, now you've talked utility. We have joggers, bikers, and walkers, and discs, right, flying around. So how do we do that? Well, we can figure it out. And I have been to Allen Creek, and not only is it a more challenging course, but, you know, I'm not sure they have the staff to keep it up. There's mud at times, but it's also pretty remote. And so from a safety standpoint, I'm not sure that it's ideal for the group. I love the idea of younger children having a little freedom and growing up, you know, in a park and being able to go a little bit. Most of them have phones now, so if there is an issue, they can get help if they need it. But they're close enough to home to feel comfortable. And people that would look for opportunists that are criminals and bad people, right? They're less likely to target an area like this. It's so.
Yeah, I'm in favor of the disc golf here.
I really like that idea.
As long as it doesn't, like we talked about, it doesn't detract from the walkers, the bikers.
It doesn't impede on the other utility of the others.
The kids that want to fish once we finish, fixing up the pond.
There was a way to do
we
that.
can continue to use the park the way it's currently being used.
Right.
And I was hoping, Keith, that you would give us, in our report, there was like hot button things for our 6 existing parks. Did you want to, unless anyone else had other comments, run through kind of the overview of that, just so we can all hear?
The recommendations for each park?
Correct, yeah.
Are we done with the comment?
Nope.
No,
We've got. Go ahead, Tom.
Let's finish some public comments real quick. What?
Quick, I'm just gonna second Anthony working 3082 Avenue. Just seconding a lot of things about this. I was here for both of those places, and I was curious, how did they lay this thing out? It was laid out very well. Interactions between joggers and bikes and walkers. And I agree with a lot was said about it. Worked well as trying to help out. I did have one quick question in regards to that. I know you said that park in particular was not option for it. That was great. It worked out just fine, and I know my 10-year-old loved it.
Was anybody injured by any flying discs, or any joggers get hit, or any injuries to vehicles, or
I stayed
like
for
catastrophic
the
events that typically happen during?
There was signage, flying discs around.
Yep.
And as disc golfers, we abide by the singles.
Yeah.
We're golfers yelling forward and pass by and take our moment to correct. And I was curious myself when I heard both of those things.
And we found several of Tom's discs in the pond when we drained it, so it's good.
On the other side of the creek, I tried to get to the thorns got me.
But it's nice because then it's not just all about soccer or people running or walking or people in the gazebo. It's also about other people that, like you said, using a park in a way that we don't have to spend $1 million and brings people in, gets people exercising, gets them happy, and sharing the park that this belongs to everyone. We're not exclusively, we're going to do field sports, we're going to do baseball. We also have other people who want to do things. It's very simple.
Yep. And hey, what are we going to do? We're bored today. Well, let's just ride our bike over and get a quick round. I like the idea of having a less challenging from a disc. For me, I would have been bad. But to know that there's a place where you can start and grow passion, right? Plant a seed. And for me, that's huge because the number one thing with children especially is is access to opportunity. And when you give people access to opportunity, good things happen, right? And so if we have increased opportunities, regardless if it's advanced or novice, I think we'll see a lot of good feedback and return on that investment in our community. So
yeah, and I think
Big
government
fan.
needs to say yes sometimes. I hear a lot of
Right.
no, we can't try that or this or that, and that really, I can't stand that. I like it when government can say yes and be reasonable.
the thing I like about too is, Tom, your passion is amazing.
Yeah,
for
he
the
sold
sport.
me on it.
Well, I just think it's great to have, and
Yeah.
and every time there's been an objection or a curveball, you've done great to
Yeah,
address it,
beautiful.
and I appreciate you as a resident being as engaged as you are.
Yeah.
That 7848 Charlotte Court. And I would like, let's keep straight.
Yes.
You said that this park in particular would not.
It's not so much that it couldn't be good, it's that there's a lot of other potential activities here. And I wouldn't want to see that disc golf take the place of all of those. So it is possible, and it planned very carefully.
I like to have it all together. It's possible to make it all work. Is that what you're saying?
If you
'Cause I had
carefully
the same
plan a
question.
disc golf course, you can go around all the other amenities. What's really more important is that you plan out all of what you want to do here before you implement.
Commit to one or two
Okay,
things, yeah.
Right, because then suddenly, I've seen this before, you have to relocate a bunch of disc golf courses and then there are holes, and since they're already established, there's opposition to that.
So I would love for you to come to my event. Second, what Randy said about our parks, how helpful and how, especially last year when I couldn't disagree more. I think that this is absolutely correct. Hills, the streams, the way it flows, it's perfect for what will be probably the best time of this golf course. All over.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I was wondering what you meant by that as well, because I think it's beautiful here, and it's like playing real golf, which I don't play, but you don't want to go you want to go somewhere where it's beautiful. That's part of the experience, and I understand your concerns though. You wouldn't want it to take over the park, and I even told Tom I was concerned about maybe permanent installation because you've got to have all the concrete pads and all that. I don't know how much I'd want to take away from the natural beauty, but I think there's a way to mesh.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Mesh it. We talked and making sure people are safe, and it wouldn't be a huge course, and maybe start out with a temporary course, to see how it worked or something. And then if it's a total disaster, we don't do it. But I understand what you're saying.
We talked about temporary mobile kind of installation so that we can make adjustments, and
see how it works.
and I met with Mr. Bowers and actually talked about, hey, if we have that ability and we have, we didn't see that coming, or, you can have a snapshot event like that and everything goes well. And then if you have 3 weeks, you run into those exceptions that you may not have had an opportunity to present themselves. So, but again, the willingness, I think, of you and the folks working with you to go through that heavy lifting and make it right is what I've been most pleased with. And to your point, I think if I could try and repackage it a bit, what I heard you saying is that we have to take a holistic view of all of our assets from a park standpoint, and all of the features and opportunities that we're trying to offer the community, and make sure that we look holistically before we commit to making one-off decisions at any particular park. And I think we're preparing to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's what his point was.
Yeah, exactly.
Make sure
Yeah,
it's together.
right.
Also, I want to make clear, I'm not opposed to disc golf. I think disc golf is great. In fact, the disc golf groups that I've worked with in other communities, they will design the course for you. They get volunteers to help you install it. It costs you very little. And there is a difference between a 9-hole course for beginners and a tournament level.
Right.
Yes.
Or not just the footprint, but how it might interact with others.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be in favor of the bigger one, but I talked to Tom extensively about the smaller course and it would be very unique too, and kids could come. I think it would be great.
The disc golf course isn't gonna alienate anything else that you do.
Yeah.
I think disc golf course was old, it was right over top of that. Disc golf course is only used at the time. They're having an event at the amphitheater, put a trash bag over that hole and see who's supposed to be. Pretty simple. And as far as, we could put in a state-of-the-art, top-of-the-line disc golf course for $20,000 in this park. My recommendation, first of all, I've been playing since the 90s, and I would be more than happy to volunteer my time, anything I can do to help this. But my recommendation is that you put the baskets in further today. And it's so easy to move the baskets. It's a little bit of concrete. So if you have one, you're like, you know what, this one's not working, you can pull it out and remove it. Then 6 months, a year from now, that's when you put the concrete pads in for after the park's been played for a long time. Not just by people like me who are good at this golf, but by some of these younger kids that there may be different issues and maybe better ways to do it for them. Just want to mention a couple things. Most disc golf courses have walking paths that go through. Ones in Marysville, the whole course goes along the walking path. Whitehall goes along the walking path. So you're in a Prospect, right by the parking lots, right by the walking paths, right by the baseball fields. Just put one at Big Walnut Middle School, right by, those are the whole campus. You look, and you see the different scenes. One in Worthington, right over the walking path, there's one in Hoover. It's got walking paths right through it. And I asked the people that walk it, like, hey, does it bother you if there's disc golf? And they don't know. They think it's kind of cool. They wait and watch. When you're throwing off the tee pad, you're setting up, you're preparing, you're thinking about what you're doing. If you see someone coming, you'll see them coming. And the way that we've designed this course, the course has helped be designed by Brad Schick, who's also Orange Township resident. He's sponsored by Disc Golf. And he is the #1, or at least last year, was the #1 player in the state of Ohio. So there's a lot of thought put into how the course should be laid out. So we do have videos here. Is that right? The video cameras in front.
Correct.
So yesterday we had about 50 people play. Most of them are young kids. 2 of them said they beat me. I'd like to do that. 4 of them aren't.
Instant replay.
So Eric Eichel, Lucas, I think they both cheated. So if you can check on that.
We'll get that for you.
And then this is a list of, I think some of you have already seen this. There's 50 disc golf courses within about 30 minutes of here.
It's all one there.
Which one is that
You
one?
can share.
And
I've seen
most
it.
of
I got the
them-
electronic copy.
look at the globe. In 2011, there were 3 new courses in our area. 2020, there was 4. 2019, there was 5. There was one put up at Big Walnut School. Since then, there's one in Arlington called Chamber Circle. There's one in Blackville called Moose Trail. There's one in Newark called Valley Trails. And all 3 of those that were put in this year, 9 whole courses that are kid-friendly and user-friendly.
Awesome.
I can't ask for more too. And by the way, people say pickleball is the fastest growing. There's a 50% increase in rounds played. Every single state in the United States had a double-digit growth in 2020.
Thank you for all your
Thank
hard
you.
work. Yes.
My name is Brenda Schneider. I live in the condos across from the Aquatic Center. I have 2 comments. First one is biking and cycling. I bike 30 to 40 miles a week and I have a heck of a time crossing the railroad track to use the Alpine Trail that are out Canyon and Alpine High Schools. Is there any chance we're trying to work around that railroad track?
So the railroad track has been a challenge for quite some years. We, as a township, have the pace with addressing that has increased. It's one of the topics I meet with the engineers about regularly to talk on funding, federal funding, and they are working actively right now to obtain funding. I actually have a meeting tomorrow with the superintendent where we're going to discuss some funding opportunities that would fast track our ability to fund an underpass there, which would include and facilitate pedestrian crossing. It's going to be a longer term project that's going to be painful.
Is it 7 to 10 years?
No, it's
That's what they were saying. How, for the overpass?
for the underpass.
Yeah, to start, yeah, the underpass.
2026.
Yeah, it wasn't going to start it, but
Yeah,
but as far as it's starting, the timelines, I think, as funding and grants and things show up, the timelines move. I'm confident that we can get the funding for it. which will start to mobilize the interest and pick things up.
But it was 7 to 10 years. That
It's
doesn't
going to be a
help.
while.
And so we've had this problem for years. And back when the term before this, I must have spent 50 hours trying to work with the railroad. They're awful. I mean, they're lawless. You can't. They say they're going to help you, and then they make you go through all these things, and they change the rules, and they don't answer your phone calls, and there's nothing you can do about it because and for good reason, they're independent because then people would mess with their railroad tracks, but they will not help us. They don't want crossings. They don't want anyone crossing the railroad track. They don't want you building. That's why the trail dead ends there. They don't want you building it onto their property. They don't even like you to build it near their property.
I mean, I walk my bike, I used to ride my bike,
Right.
now I walk my bike. Go to the tracks,
It's great.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
I mean, I wish that because I live on the other side of 23 and the Green Meadow side.
It's from the
so
other
I
side of
can't-
the tracks.
Yeah, I live on the other side of the tracks, and we can't get anywhere. We're trapped, and my son will run. My youngest son will run, up Orange Road or bike, and that's so treacherous. And then do the same thing, and I'm not going to do that. So I wish there was a way. We've tried so hard to some kind of workaround or
We looked at a pedestrian crossing option, and they wanted to have like its own.
Yeah. No, it's a Z gate
We've
where
looked at-
you're required to look left and right,
Yeah.
and that's when they drop the ball. I can't tell you how many hours have been spent.
We haven't given up on it.
But
We
I
tried
don't
to
know if this
leverage Franklin Road crossing to bring them to the table to negotiate, and they would not have it until the very end. They said, "Well, let's talk about Orange Road," and it was too late legally at that point. So
It's awful.
we'll continue to work on that, but we know it's a pain point, and I live, like I said, right over here. Every day I see people trying to navigate that, and it's hard to watch. It's
Especially
something
the
we
little
hate.
kids. That's
Yeah.
what gets me. The little
My
ones
son's
going on.
rollerbladed over
Huh?
rollerbladed over him. Like just
We're continuing to work, and I know,
It's pretty hopeless.
like I said,
though.
it's something that's on the radar. I know we talk about the railroad, and that's always a conversation.
It's awful. I mean, it's hopeless. I just say I can't. We're never going to get over the tracks. It's a real shame because I think it's safer to have something safe for people to cross than like my son. There was a train stuck on the tracks, and he helped some lady over. Like they both went through the stopped train tracks to put their bikes through and get the other side. You know how dangerous that is. Like
Yeah.
it's so much safer if they would allow us to have safe access. And I keep thinking someday something else is going to happen. So I don't. And the senators and things try to put pressure on. That's a way too, is maybe to contact our local representatives. They can try to put pressure on them, but like I said, they are accountable to nobody.
They
But
just pay
we'd love to get it
their own
passed.
commission that does it. And what's your pickleball?
Yeah, pickleball is easier.
What's your pickle with pickleball?
I'm traveling 30 to 35 minutes. Days a week to play pickleball in Dublin, Westerville, and the beautiful Fort Weir Township. Those are gorgeous. So I would love to see more people. And I know it's more expensive than
Oh, is it?
yeah, because
You don't lose your balls, right?
yeah, when you serve your
Yeah.
ball, if you're not a good server, it could go here that street, but if there's a fence, it kind of.
Did you hear that we recently approved a new pickleball and tennis court? Not like free, like a park, but it'll be off of Green Meadows.
But it's a commercial.
It's a commercial.
It's a business though. Like,
It's called next.
They're going to have some public access, but it's
but is it free?
An indoor facility.
yeah, it's covered.
Yes, new gen tennis facility.
Yeah.
It's got covered courts and
It'll be open air in the summer.
And they're going to open. They're going to take the dome off, and of course there's a fee and all that, but it will be pretty cool.
the high school.
Actually, more behind Menards.
So it'll be close, and that
Like
should
in
go
between
up
the
pretty,
high school and
pretty
Menards.
soon here.
That little,
think
you know the home road, home
Right,
road,
you could ride the bridge to nowhere, and then you could
Bridge to
go
somewhere,
pickleball.
right?
So there'll be some opportunities, even if
You
they're
go bridge to
township
pickleball.
sponsored. Yeah,
It's
and
home road where it curves and you know where the stop is now, and it kind of tees out right in that area.
so there'll be more opportunity, at least from a private standpoint.
And
So
also more
Correct. Yep.
We're working on
Yeah,
financing
yeah.
for that.
That's the financial part that I said. We can't just approve a change order of that magnitude without doing work to try and get the most for the taxpayer dollar. It's just
Yeah.
pretty
Silas is
conservative
doing a
board,
great
so
job helping us out on that.
we're gonna fight for every dollar.
So, yeah.
Thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
comments. I saw another hand in the back there. Hey.
Hi, this is Karthik. I live in Picture. First of all, I would like to thank College Township on it. But earlier we used to travel because saves us a lot of time and money. Those you don't know about cricket, it has been tremendously increasing across the country. So in 2024, World Cup, that's the first time over in the United States. So there is like lots and lots of growth in cricket as well as men's cricket. Silas has been really helpful providing helping us develop this cricket. So two things that concerns us is the extension of the parking lot, the wall that we basically have parking lot extension. We have cars of people that's up to site. The other one is since there's a lot of demand, so practice courts will help as well. We don't have to have that. That feel is good. Dedicated has been helpful. Along with that, if we have one or two practice courts, then probably we can share that with softball and baseball as well. That way, we can play from practice. So,
Do you guys currently utilize the parks, softball and baseball fields? Well, baseball fields really, I guess, to practice?
yeah,
Okay.
we do, but that's with tennis ball, tennis ball. But to have an actual practice ball, we need to have an hot park. Probably have the not fence, the
Netting?
nets. Yeah.
Okay.
What's your address again? Coach.
And yeah, we had spoken previously about this, and why I shared the comments that you had conveyed to me about the parking lot changes when we spoke, and it makes sense. If you see a cricket ball, you know it can. You don't really want to.
Are they wood?
No, they're like a hard plastic.
Plastic. I've never.
Like a. Is it?
I've never seen one.
Okay. It's hard.
It's pretty hard.
I didn't even know that. That's why it says plastic. So it was that hard.
I think you might have seen the tennis ball, hot tennis ball.
I've seen that one too.
Okay. But
Yep.
the actual cricket, we need to have two layers.
Yes, every.
Okay, I've never seen it.
And it's another sport that's growing. I mentioned earlier opportunity. My son at Glen Oak Elementary, cricket's his favorite. And when
They played in
when
gym?
they oh yeah, they not with the hard ball, with the tennis ball, but they we went to one of the curriculum and parent days and where they had the open gym and everything, and everyone they were taking turns with cricket. They were having so much fun with it. So it's an opportunity thing for us to consider.
We have more than 40 teams in Columbus. We have probably 10. Where we have one already, so next year there's a lot of demand.
Good.
We have around 15 months.
We have recently received a potential partnership opportunity to look at explore a cricket pitch within the township, but on non-township land. And it's just very early discussion. I'm not going to go too far into that yet, but I'm optimistic we'll find a way to make something out of the opportunity to work with another agency. So I'm hoping to share more formal information about that in the coming months as Mr. Bowers works through that. And I hope, as I keep saying Mr. Bowers too, I do want to take a minute for people watching and those of you here to recognize the work he's done, because it's been tremendous. The number of opportunities that we've seen surface since he's joined our team and brought some relationships to the table. And so I hope as a community, as folks listen and participate, they recognize that our staff and our team here at the township And I appreciate your nice comments about him because I know he does work very hard to satisfy all the different organizations and communicate with them, and his staff does as well. So thank you very much for that. All right. Uh-oh. Here we go.
Hello, my name is Tony Batchek. I live at 2040 Airport. And just something to consider is this, now that we have this great master plan and a lot of information to work with, have you guys ever thought about a secondary levy to help support all the projects and initiatives?
Like an additional parks levy?
Yeah, separate from. So is it permanent to your levy?
What we're putting on right now is 3 years, and this is the last year it collects, so it's going to be on the November ballot, renewing 5 years at 1 mills. We decided to go that direction, and you guys can all correct me if I'm wrong. But when the board was discussing it, there was a lot of unknowns with what we were going to see from the plan because the plan wasn't ready by the time we had to have everything to the Board of Elections to get on the levies. So the thought is if the plan does drive a need for additional funds based on what we find in here, then we would go out and just do another levy at that point.
And I think what
Do one that's just for 5 years and have a specific end date that you have specific goals.
Correct.
Yeah,
That's what I was going to say is
You want to raise this much money.
for this.
Exactly. Yeah, for
Correct.
a reason.
And that's something you.
Yeah.
We've looked
That way they-
at potential bonds, but again, tomorrow is a big meeting for a few reasons with the schools. Part of that may potentially be fields that could benefit the township as well, and township residents improving the accessibility to existing fields and collaboration with the schools so their teams would have access, but in the absence of their team using it, the township would. So it'd be some scheduling challenges there, of course. But also from a funding standpoint, we do now have a joint economic development district, and we have partnerships forming increasingly from businesses, which will contribute. As most people know, townships don't have an income tax, right? So a JED allows us to partner with the municipality. And we're working on finalizing everything now with our partner, in this case, Worthington. And so as soon as our city council reconvenes and gets to work, we'll be moving forward with formalizing that. And so businesses that want to come and be a part of our zoning overlay will be required to join in that, and we'll be continuing to expand that district once it's formalized throughout the township commercial sector. And so those funds will be, we have to specify what they're for, roads and things of that nature. The goal of the economic development tools and leveraging those is to do the opposite of what you proposed, right? We don't want to go to taxpayers when there's inflation, pending recession, all of these things going in a very high tax area already and say, we're going to hit you again. What we're trying to do is be creative and come up with funding.
All great. All I'm saying that if we have all these great things that we want to do or propose,
We got to pay for them.
Absolutely. It takes time and money.
Right.
And everybody here loves what's going on. And it's just, you can let the voters decide.
Correct. Yeah, I agree.
There's nothing against. Like we're asking
Nope, I'm just sharing
for money to do these.
I'm sharing with you the economic development tools because that's the money part, right? And so when we have proven, I'll call it reserves or proven revenue streams that we can take to a bonding agency and say, listen, we've got a joint economic development district, or we have a TIF, or we have this or that, right? These revenue streams have been established and they're increasing or they're coming in. We would like to bond against that and pay it back. So what that allows us to do is leverage a revenue stream to avoid increasing taxes and allow the business community to start contributing to the community. And that's ideal for me. Yep.
Yeah.
So it would just be earmarking that money for those specific uses. I personally, if we do go and ask for things, we do exactly what you said, right? We have hey, you said you wanted more soccer fields. You said you wanted more disc golf. You've wanted more of this, that, and the other. Accessibility is becoming an increasing demand, right? Changing rooms for families so that if they have children that need those additional amenities or facilities, that they have access to those so that more people can enjoy the resources that we have. And so we would go out to the public, and I think this board, and I can speak pretty confidently saying we're going to be as specific as we can, especially for asking for taxpayer dollars, and let them vote. Let them vote, to your point. And we would look to you and folks in the room to say, hey, we're passionate, right? And we want to do this in time and money. It's time sensitive, whatever. We need your help in spreading the word and explaining to residents exactly what's going on and why we're doing it. So thank you, Tony.
Yeah, to get people excited about the projects and want to pay for them.
Only one from each organization.
My name is Shady Hartwell. I live at 2455 Montgomery Lane, living in the center now. I moved here, I think, probably as for the same reason that we moved here is the quality of our school system for my children. Attended the Old School District, graduated on down and point is, school district is a very critical component of our community. And that interrelationship between the community is very important. As a child advocate, someone passionate about working with children, I decided to soccer organization to utilize my expertise positively impact possible. I am so incredibly thankful for all the help that the township has brought to the community or offered to the community for individuals like myself and like the one that I created, a 501c3 organization provide for boys and girls age 7 to 17. The interesting thing, the reason I brought up those schools, soccer is only offered in our school district beginning freshman year in high school. It is one of the very few varsity sports not introduced at the middle school level. And I started doing my due diligence on should I or shouldn't I invest all of my time and resources in the project. I reached out to the school district and said, would you be interested in a goofball like me helping to start a school-sponsored middle school program? Their response was no, love soccer. What I found out is that it's common across. Just a unique aspect. What organization like Orange United is trying to help add value to the community, introduce organized sports at quality level that are not being provided by the district. At the same time, supporting the school district, developing them for their program. So, just wanted to point out that point that soccer is unique compared to baseball and other. Every park that we create, every school has a baseball field now. Not a soccer field. And just to clarify, the township doesn't have soccer. The township just has green spaces. And those green spaces can be rented out by any organization that has an organization to petition for those fields. I have a dream that my organization would not just be soccer, but would be providing an ultimate frisbee. I played frisbee golf as a, my college years and older, but ultimate frisbee is a similar sport. If children who may not be passionate about soccer but use that space and utilize a frisbee, it's combination play. It's getting the kids out of the house, helping with these issues that are paramount right now with teenagers and pre-teenagers not having the best environment, I guess, to develop and be happy and deal with the challenges that are thrown. I'll be quiet. I just want to say thank you for everything that the board, township, the staff, and everyone involved has done. I'm passionate in finding more ways to bring members of the community together to advocate for children, continue to destination for new first community members.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. That's a good point about the middle school and having no soccer. That's a really good point. Is that any more public comment?
Keith, did you want to run through those 6 parks that we have? And just
Sure, I can
let
quickly
everybody
cover
know
some
what-
of the things. Start with Walker Wood. The master plan is the first thing, and that is basically you should do this with any major improvement is you reach out to the community and find out what they want, especially at a neighborhood park. Our input was more community wide, so we can't tell you in this specific neighborhood what these neighbors want, and it's best to reach out directly with them and find out. Okay? Also, things can change over 10 years. Outdoor fitness equipment was mentioned because it's a fitness activity and it can easily fit in a small park. This neighborhood feature, you'll see that on several of the improvements. That is basically a placeholder for whatever the community wants. Since we don't know, but we definitely recommend you do something for them. That's what that is for. Half basketball court, which is very common in a neighborhood park. Let's see. On to Glen Oak. One of the main things here was to kind of treat Glen Oak and Rowe collectively. They're the same neighborhood. They're not very far apart. So you wouldn't want to do the same thing in both of those parks. So when you do any kind of planning for those, do it together. Wildflower Meadow is basically anything, something like that, or a prairie would reduce some of the mowing you would have to do while also kind of adding an amenity and maybe bringing some wildlife and reducing maybe some hours and staff. That was mostly improvements to existing stuff there. North Orange, some shade, a possible location for an amphitheater, maybe a possible location for a skate park. You do have some additional space in that park, and that's an element that meets a demographic that is harder to reach, as Sloan has mentioned here. It's a age range that maybe isn't currently engaged with a lot of your park amenities. I have this picture of a challenge course, which is like parkour. I forget where I have that recommended.
I think you have that in North
What's
Orange.
It is North Orange?
Yeah. But
That's
we talked
it?
about preservation's going to bring us that, so. Preservation park.
Right, and depending on what they do, that's one side of town. It might still be a
we
good
don't
idea to do
just
this on
want
the
everything
opposite
that's-
side
it's
of
like
town.
just having one playground in one place. And
Right,
tons
and
of teenagers
that could be,
here.
there's all kinds of different ones, different levels. Certain ones, they do timing, so you can compare to how you did compare to other people.
And you want it walkable. It's just like a playground for
Yeah,
older kids.
exactly. So were you to do that, I would recommend you do something different than what Preservation Parks
Okay.
ultimately does.
Thank you.
Row is, as I mentioned, collectively with Glen Oak, but most of what's recommended there is just improving what you have, and in some cases, adding some shade. And in fact, we had one recommendation that has already been done, improving the playground surfacing. Township Hall here, we have, that's another possible place for the amphitheater, some outdoor fitness equipment. A playground, you don't have a playground here.
There are trees and sticks and grass. That's all they need.
Well, as you say that, a
Here at
nature
this-
play
at this
area,
park,
it can be more nature themed. So this is sort of a passive park. It might
The
be.
net, the integrated, like they call them, the integrated.
Yeah,
landscape
rocks and logs. They can be, sometimes even the logs are made out of concrete, but different kinds of elements that kind of blend in with the environment. And in a lot of cases, there's more popular even. With
Yeah,
the
we
kids.
had a proposal actually from an engineer where we're putting the Veterans Memorial. They had come up with a design for like a natural, more integrated into the existing landscape, like play area. It's almost like a challenge course play area all in one, where you can see kids, some kids running through and getting a more, intense workout from it, as opposed to others just walking through and just jumping around, you know.
Well, if you put anything out there, kids are going to find a way to play with it.
Correct.
Did you talk about North Road?
I have not talked about North Road yet. Should I skip it?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. It crossed pages. Pickleball, which is currently in the works. Fitness shelter with restrooms, also in the works. A large all-access playground that accessible to all. So that's one of those places where you could improve your ADA. Yeah, have something that everyone can use. Of course, you have a master plan to kind of talk to the public. And that's something you should continue to do throughout this entire process. Continuously engage the public. Another possible, some space that you don't need for amenities rather than having an open grass, maybe consider a pollinator garden or wildflowers or prairie or things like that. And it's another possible place for outdoor fitness, especially with all, you've got athletic fields there, it can help with the training. Oh, and the perimeter trail can obviously finish that up and work with the schools to try to continue that trail so that it goes through their property as well. I think that's the... Oh, the bridge park. Since it's a trailhead, all we really have there is maybe a bike repair station. So wayfinding, tell you where you can go from there, and possibly renaming it to Glenn Fisher Memorial Bridge Trailhead, since that's what it is. At the end of this chapter, though, we do have some guidelines for you to develop additional neighborhood parks. What elements should be included? You can also provide these to any developers if they're considering including that in their development.
And I want to, that's a great point, Miss Bonnie, that I think we can bring Robin into as far as developer applications that come in, sharing our parks information with them and kind of what some of the goals are. So, for example, the Schottenstein property that they developed, they put pickleball courts in that's on Home Road. And so as developers come in, making sure that they have awareness of what our existing residents, because it's going to be consistent with the folks moving in, right? Some of them are going to be our residents. Just as a best practice. Hey, here's your Welcome to Orange Township packet. Thank you for applying to develop here. Here's information about our parks and some of the amenities that we have are currently looking to bolster, and just as recommendations for your design, if you will. That's a great point.
Just something I just thought of that we recommend often is, you're talking about sending that to developers. That's something you can also send to residents. Here's what we have.
Yeah.
In Orange Township, here's what's available. It's like a welcome pack.
Welcome pack.
Include that in part of
I like that.
Yes.
Yep. And what we actually talked about that, I think, in 2020, about having pre-COVID, having a on our website. If you're new, like a new resident, click, and it just kind of gives a summary and goes through. If you want more information, you click, and then it goes and directs them to specific areas of our existing website. But just a welcome message, you know. If they sign up for listserv, it sends it out to the new folks, things like that. So all stuff that we consider we need to execute. So thank you.
I feel like a couple of at least one of our board members on the OTAC is a realtor, so she could probably help us even connect with some local realtors to, if we were to do that, let them know. So.
Formal way where we get this acquisition or something happen, new resident. Titles registered. I mean, the newspaper gets it, so get it too. Anything further?
We have a resolution ready for the board this evening to adopt the Parks Master Plan.
Go ahead.
Well, I do have a question. What?
I was just saying, go ahead and read it.
I can read it. Oh, I might do that in a minute. Mr. Bowers, what would be your plan if we pass this? What would be the next steps that would be taken?
Based on the recommendations in the new standards and what the recommendations were for each individual park, I think we collectively as a township take a look at, what low-hanging fruit might be quickly resolved, which bigger projects might take a little more time, try to prioritize which ones we think are most important to the community, and then start to put a path forward on how we accomplish those goals.
Maybe your response made me think of from a project management mindset. It's just for both of you. Is there a way when we look at this, we could scope cost estimates, just ballpark? So, for example, when we sit down to look at this, almost like a Gantt chart or something of that nature, right? Where we say, look, we have a levy, we have limited resources. This is status quo, current state. You have $4 million unencumbered dollars to work with. Here's what each of these goals is going to cost, right? And to your point, maybe we go after utility first. Maybe we go after a specific underserved feature. So we don't have disc golf, we don't have enough pickleball, or we don't have enough cricket. But we look at, this chart, which is great, that says, here's where you stack up on the national.
He gave us that in the plan, the end of chapter 8, kind of a ballpark estimate.
Right. So I want to combine that with what I'm proposing is that we stack that up with our funds. We'll have to work with the fiscal office, obviously, and say, this is where we're at. And I want to include, since we're keeping our levy the same, we'll have a good pulse on what we're going to continue to earn. So we have incoming revenue, where we're at today, and all of these things. And collectively from those, we can come up with a timeline to say that we can communicate back to the residents and say, this is current state over the next 3 years. And our proposal, trails, etc. What we know is already, for example, North Road, what we know is coming, but put together more of a timeline that's one pager or 2 pages and says, this is of course, the board would have work to do with your department and the fiscal office, obviously, to collaborate with resident feedback to say, this is kind of what's up for grabs. I know, and I put a post out recently about this with respect to looking at the township's balance sheet. It's very deceiving because of the way government funds transpire, and we collect and pay certain timeframes in bulk. And so, gosh, they're sitting on 26 million, and then next month everything's due, and we have 4 million, right? And so we have to be careful, when we're communicating out to the resident base and our constituents, that they understand that. There was a kind of a debacle with the county because of some misunderstandings related to that. And so to say this much is in the kitty or in the fund right now, maybe half of that or more is spoken for with pending projects. And so we have some work to do.
Yeah, but I would like to see a definitive timeline rather than we're going to try to do this, we're going to try to do this.
Yeah, I
This is
agree.
the way this township has been run for 20 years. We're going to try this, we're going to try this. Now COVID derailed everything. I agree. But
I like that.
rather,
The Gantt chart, timeline.
Yeah, a timeline versus, well, we're going to try to do this next year. The residents always ask, well, when's this? What's the projected date for this completion? What about this? And then if it has to change, it has to change. But we better have a good reason why.
But the beauty of that is that what you're describing is if we do have to Mr. Benechek's point, we have to go ask for money. We say, hey, here's current timeline.
Yeah.
With this levy, all of this moves left, right? Or these 3 things move left, and we can communicate around a visual, which I think is always the
and we
most
can
effective.
show that we're actually getting things done, and then that makes people want to vote for a levy that's actually going to have an impact, and they can be held accountable. Because that's what a Parks Board. I will promote that again. The Parks Board, a lot of times when you're giving them this information, they can be ambassadors to the community, and they can, like I said, Parks people are very, very excitable, and they like to get things done, and they're usually motivated and pretty fit, and they just can be very dynamic. I mean, and at least sometimes things atrophy, but they can get in, they know how much money, they can help under our guidance prioritize things, but they're actually residents, and they know what they want, and they know what other people want, and they can really add a momentum that is hard to find sometimes with this.
When you put and I didn't dive into that with you when we reviewed the plan as far as each potential option and what the cost was. When you developed that projection, was that just for our township in general? So how specific? It's just a ballpark, correct?
The costs?
Yeah.
Yes. They are just an
national
estimate,
average type thing.
and it is estimated as if you put it out to bid. So if you do something internally, it would be less. And it doesn't include any kind of grants.
Okay. So,
But again, these are estimated,
right.
you know, a couple months ago.
It's going to
Who
change
knows? It's
drastically.
changed.
And the reason I asked that is exactly where you were going. I think we can get smart on that as we start to see bids come in. We can look at where we were benchmarked and apply that same proportion across the board to keep tabs on. Maybe we have to adjust that same timeline because, you know, according to our chart, you know, we bid something out. The chart says it's 1.2 million. We bid it out. It came out at 1.8. So we know we've got that, you know, $600,000. What proportion of that is it? So it's 50% higher, right? So we take that 50%, distribute that across the board, and our timeline adjusts accordingly. So, yeah. Got all the notes there, Mr. Bowers.
I do. And I'll add to that too. You know, as Keith kind of hit on earlier, and as the board's likely aware, you know, out of a lot of the projections that are on here and some of the ideas of projects that cost, some of these are actually already done.
Which
Much
I would
like,
love to be able to publicize.
yeah, and several of these are already in motion in one stage or another. It's kind of like a road project where we know something's coming and we kind of got a little bit of legwork done on it, waiting for grant funding or some announcement to come through, or waiting for engineering, design costs, whatever it would be. Once those projects are actually approved by the board and in motion is when we actually publicize the fact that they're actually going to happen. So a lot of these recommendations can be prioritized to be an as-needed thing, or stuff we can kind of chip away at as time goes, if you will, whether it be trees and landscaping, water bottle fillers, you know, little things like that. Some of those things we can take a bite of as we go. They're a little more of a low-hanging fruit where we can get to them a little bit quicker. But there's also some big-ticket items, too. They're going to take a substantial amount of planning and potentially, as Mr. Benishek mentioned, potentially a bond issue, potentially a pilot projects that all get done at once. And, you know, a lot of our bike paths fit in that mold, too. We have some bike paths coming up, as we discussed on Monday, that are about $500,000 coming next year. We have some that are $100,000. Much easier connection to make, a little quicker, a little cheaper, but we do rely on outside firms to engineer and design and bid those out for us. So there's a time frame that's unknown a lot of times, and especially with the current day and age, those time frames are really hard to predict and hold true to. So I do try to be cautious with over promising what we think we can get done in a certain window. You know, talk about the Orange Road Tunnel, the Orange Road Underpass.
I think what we would do at a timeline standpoint is, when is the township going to action on that?
Yeah.
Not when we're expecting it to be completed. Yeah. So when are we going to prioritize that and put it out to bid and all of that, right? So we can only commit to what we control.
Yeah.
And so we could say, this is when we have funds to actually pursue project A. This is when the funds will be available in the staff and time and resources to plan project B. So we would only be able to commit and communicate out what we have within our control.
Right.
Correct.
Do we have the strained staff? That's the Orange Township has fewer staff in the benchmark, so I think it's going to be difficult to even get a lot of these projects done or started unless we.
Part of that I looked into because I saw that as well, and one of the things that they talked about with the staffing is a lot of places have staff that run programs. So think about a rec center. Like they have a lot more staff because they have a rec center, so you just have to have more staff. We don't have a rec center, so we have the outside partnerships and organizations like Olentangy United and some of the other groups that they run the.
She brought up the rec center.
That's why we need more staff. If we want programs, or if we want additional
programming, definitely we would need more staff.
Yeah, we need more staff to even plan projects and things. I mean, if we're going to start these, but I don't know. I feel like we're barely keeping up now. If we're going to start these new projects, I think it's going to be a challenge. And like literally, North Road Park was literally started in like 2005.
Yeah, and if it wasn't,
it literally has taken like 2 decades to.
A lot of that's been board driven, though.
Yeah, and if it wasn't for our staff we have currently, we wouldn't be moving forward.
Wasn't doing anything. Yeah. So what the public does is they ask us, when's this going to be done, and they've been waiting for decades. I don't know if that's going to change, but I would like it to.
Well, and as I mentioned before, I've been trying to hold true to the policy of announcing a timeline once we have one. Like on Monday when North Road Park Phase 3 was approved, we kind of have a timeline on that. Since it was approved, now we're committed. We're autographed. We're ready to go. Those projects are a little more easier to stand by because once it's signed and once we agree to commit the money, purchase orders distributed, okay, now we have a finite timeline on when it's going to happen. Again, I hate to overpromise, hey, this is going to happen by August 1st. Because the way the world is right now, supply, demand, people, money, like everything is changing rapidly.
Yeah, I
so
don't
it's
want
hard
to ever commit to having a concluded project.
Yeah.
So
We just
to
can't
that
predict
point,
that.
But the exact order also.
Yeah.
This is
So
order.
what I'm hearing is we want to
Dynamic
work
plan.
together to prioritize what, like, basically I'm just thinking a list, right? And
Correct.
This is what we can do in the next, next couple months.
Yeah,
This is
just
what
like the
we're gonna
Gantt
do
chart
next year.
and-
Yeah.
yeah, and again, several of these are already in motion. I know I've talked with several of the board members, and there's some projects that'll be probably in the next 6 months, either out to bid or already awarded at that point. We'll be able to distribute information on those and actually have a concrete plan going forward. So it's not just, well, we're hoping to do this by this point in time, and actually have some concrete information to distribute, which I think is something that we can be proud of and actually have a good path forward. It's a lot.
Remember, I don't think we actually have to, we're still checking on this. Did you ever check on, we don't have to bid out parks projects, we can get requests for quotes? Did you ever, I sent an email today, but I saw Chris is out, so I sent it to Mark, but did you ever hear back on?
So I guess it just depends on the type of, well, we're not using ARP. So
Yeah.
yes, if we do not have to bid.
We don't have to bid parks projects, so, I mean, you're going to get different proposals, but that's the bidding process, that is what takes government so long. And so now that, we're aware of that loophole, we should be, for reasonable things, I mean, we can give some.
Yeah, I think
quotes if we want.
it's good for some circumstances so we can get the best deal.
Yeah.
So,
and if you bid out versus getting quotes, it's probably going to end up being around the same.
and some of our projects, we've been
Right.
going through the procurement, the government. I'm sorry, what the term is.
You got it.
I'm
You're
close.
right.
Like getting the pond.
Job order contracting type of work.
Yes.
That needs to be done now. That we can't wait for the pond. Okay, I don't have anything else. So this is the.
There you go, read it
Do I
out.
get to read it? Just
Yeah,
this
you
part,
do.
though,
I
right?
was
Okay.
late.
Just the title.
You're in charge.
I'm in charge. Oh, that's right. I forgot. I'll take this back now. Thank you. Okay, I make a motion to approve Resolution 22-278, approving the 2022 Orange Township 10-year Master Plan for Parks, Recreation, and Trails.
Second.
Can happen.
Mr. Grumbles?
Yes.
Mrs. Faust?
Yes.
Ms. Knapp?
Yes? And I'll read Resolution 22-279, meeting adjournment.
Second.
Mrs. Faust?
Yes.
Mr. Grumbles?
Yes.
Mrs. Knapp?
Yes.
Ms. Knapp?
Oh,